3 months ago, I opened my wife's dresser looking for reading glasses and found a sealed tube she'd never buy for us. That should have been the end of the story. Awkward, embarrassing, forgettable. Instead, it was the fuse. The next week, I learned the man she was sneaking around with wasn't a stranger. It was my son-in-law, the guy I helped move into my daughter's place. If you think that's the punchline, buckle up. Because what happened next dragged my neighborhood into it, sent ambulances to my front door, and forced my daughter, an Arizona paramedic, to face a truth you can't unsee. I'm Frank Miller. I've spent 4 decades solving problems at a hardware store, the quiet kind of man folks ignore until something breaks. Something did. Tonight I'm going to show you how betrayal hides in plain sight, how a predator smiles for the family photo, and how the quiet guy in the back row finally made sure everyone saw it. For 38 years, Linda and I were steady as a level on a workbench. We weren't flashy, but we were reliable. One daughter raised right, a mortgage mostly paid down, and routines you could set your watch to. I wore the same orange vest at the Home Depot in North Scottsdale, drank the same coffee, drove the same truck I'd nursed past 200,000 miles. Then, little things started wobbling. Linda stayed up later than me, said she couldn't sleep. She changed her hair, just a touch, and started buying nice groceries without telling me about the budget. I know how marriages drift. The kids move out, the house gets too quiet, and you talk about the weather more than dreams. But this felt different. There was a shine in her eye that had nothing to do with me. I told myself not to overthink it. Then I caught her smiling at nothing, except it wasn't nothing. It was her phone, lighting up like a secret. Perfume came back into our house like a ghost from our 20s. Expensive, floral, loud enough to announce itself down the hallway. Linda hadn't worn scent to bed in years. Now she dabbed it on her wrist before girls' dinners. Her phone never left her palm. She got good at angling the screen away, the way teenagers do when you ask who they're texting. I tried jokes. "You joined the CIA?" And she laughed, but her laugh had a door closed behind it. We used to split grocery lists and baseball highlights. Now she had lists I wasn't on and highlights I didn't see. Maybe this is what men my age mean when they say, "We grew apart." But men my age also know the difference between drift and a riptide. I started watching patterns, the way you listen to a noisy engine and hear the one bolt coming loose. The messages came late. The perfume came earlier, and my gut said the truth was coming sooner than I wanted. Enter Tyler Cruz, my son-in-law with the easy smile and the landscaper's tan. He's the kind of guy neighbors wave at because he always has a shovel or a coil of hose in his hands. At first, his reasons made sense. Sprinkler heads clog, timers fail, lawns in Arizona don't forgive neglect. But then the visits multiplied. He'd swing by when I was on late shift, bringing over bags of soil conditioner and quick fixes he never billed me for. Generous, right? Except I've lived long enough to know generosity shouldn't come with rehearsed explanations. He spoke in tidy phrases like he'd practiced them in the mirror. "Just looking out for you, Frank. Wanted to save you a service call." I thanked him because that's what dads do. But I started noticing how he never texted me first, only Linda. And when I did reach out, he took his time getting back. Helpful men don't hide their help, performers do. And Tyler loved a stage. One Friday, I punched out early from a double shift. The late sun threw long shadows over our street, and there it was, the white pickup, parked not in front of our house but across from it, nose pointed like it was ready to leave fast. You learn a lot from trucks. A clean bed, no tools. A cab too tidy for a day's work. I killed my engine and sat long enough to hear laughter drift from our kitchen window, the kind of laughter you don't waste on small talk. Linda's voice sounded 10 years younger, and then a man's reply rolled in easy, familiar. "You know how your body can tell the truth before your brain does?" My hands went cold on the steering wheel. I walked in through the side door, keys in my palm, breath steady like I was defusing a bomb. Whatever waited in that kitchen, I promised myself one thing. I would not blow up. I would remember. And I would learn. They were side by side at the counter like they owned the place. Linda flinched so hard her chair scraped tile. Tyler didn't flinch at all. He raised my favorite mug and smiled. "Just checking your irrigation system, Frank." My name in his mouth tasted wrong. I looked at the mug, at his hand wrapped around it like he'd been practicing, and felt something inside me step back and take notes. Linda wouldn't meet my eyes. The perfume was fresh, too much for a late afternoon. It stayed in the back of my throat while I asked Tyler which zone had clogged, and he gave me a neat answer with neat words and no dirt under his nails. He left fast, with a promise to swing back tomorrow. Linda cleaned a spotless counter, wiping a circle she'd already wiped. I took my coffee to the porch and watched the white pickup idle at the stop sign a beat too long. Some men fight right away. I started counting lies. Guilt cooks different than love. That night, Linda made my favorite pot roast, the one she saves for birthdays and promotions, and she hovered like a waitress at a five-star place. Too many refills, too many, "How's that taste, honey?" I've been married long enough to know when a woman's serving a meal and when she's serving a story. The house felt like a hall of mirrors. Everything looked familiar, but nothing reflected right. She asked about my back, my feet, my day. She never once asked about my eyes. I told her I was tired and turned off the game early. In bed, she lay very still, as if stillness could make questions disappear. The clock burned red numbers into the dark. I thought about the years we'd built and the inches we were losing. I thought about my daughter, her daughter, and the trust we'd taught her to keep. Sometime around midnight, I made a decision older men make when they've had enough. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending. Morning light is a cruel truth-teller. I went looking for my reading glasses, the cheap pair that always slips between the bed and the nightstand. I checked the floor, then the top drawer on my side. Batteries, old receipts, a picture of Rachel in a softball uniform. I crossed to Linda's. You don't snoop on a good day. On a bad day, you call it looking for clarity. Her top drawer smelled like perfume and fabric softener. Silk slid under my fingers, then a shape that didn't belong, a sealed, high-end tube we never needed and certainly never discussed. For a second I saw 25 again, clumsy, curious, hopeful. Then I saw 64, careful, patient, tired of being lied to. I placed it back exactly where it had been and closed the drawer as gently as you close a casket. The house looked the same, but my home had shifted 2 inches to the left. I poured coffee, hands steady. Men my age don't panic. We prepare. You can't accuse the person you love without proof, at least not if you plan to live with yourself afterward. I sat at the kitchen table watching sunlight crawl across the tile and counted the ways a man can be wrong. Maybe the tube wasn't new. Maybe the perfume was a phase. Maybe the white pickup meant nothing. But then I remembered that laugh and the way Tyler held my mug like a trophy. Denial is a soft pillow. Truth is a wooden chair. I chose the chair. I told Linda I'd be working late all week. Inventory, audits, the usual. And she exhaled like a lifeguard after a save. That told me more than any argument could. I kissed her cheek out of habit, and she turned into it like she wanted to erase me. On my way to the truck, I looked back at our front door and understood. The next step wasn't rage. It was record-keeping. I needed to hear the words. I needed their truth on something that didn't blink. Old managers live by a simple rule. If it matters, document it. I drove to an electronics store and asked for something small, simple, clear. Nothing fancy, nothing I couldn't explain if someone found it. The kid behind the counter made a joke about recording lectures, and I smiled like a man who still believes in lectures. Back in the parking lot, I sat with the device in my hand and thought about all the husbands who never get this far. Some drink, some shout, some walk out and never come back. I tightened my grip and chose a fourth option. Listen. On the way home, I rehearsed my face in the rearview mirror, the face of a man who trusts. I greeted Linda the same way I always did, and she returned the favor. After dinner, I waited for the house to settle, for the night to bless me with quiet. Then I did what quiet men do when the world stops making sense. I pressed record. That Monday, I told Linda I'd be working late. Inventory, the kind of thing nobody wants to hear about after dinner. She didn't ask follow-ups, just gave me a quick nod and a smile too easy for a long marriage. I drove past our street like I'd missed a turn, looped around, and parked 3 blocks away where nobody knows my truck. Walking back felt like stepping into a photograph of my own life. Same Palo Verde trees, same porch lights coming on, same yapping terrier 2 houses down. Only I wasn't the same man. I cut through a side gate I'd oiled myself 20 years ago so it wouldn't squeal. The backyard smelled like watered dust and orange blossom. We'd planted those trees together. Now they watched me like witnesses. I slipped into the house with the spare key on my ring, the one our daughter Rachel still calls old school dad. In my bones, I felt it. I wasn't going home. I was entering a crime scene that just hadn't confessed yet. Quiet has a shape. Our house usually hums, refrigerator whisper, AC breathing, Linda's radio tuned to old Motown in the kitchen. That night the silence felt tilted. Like furniture after an earthquake, everything looked fine until you noticed the angle. I stood in the living room and let my eyes land on what mattered. The bookcase Rachel dusts when she visits, the photo of her graduation, our wedding picture that always leans a little left. I keep things where they belong, tools, receipts, memories. That's how I know when something's off. I slid a small recorder behind the photo albums nobody opens unless company's coming. My hands didn't shake. I told myself I was preserving truth, the way you cover a fresh pour of concrete so prints don't ruin it. The air tasted like metal. I should have felt guilty, but all I felt was honest. You can't fix what you won't look at. I clicked it on, and for the first time in weeks, I trusted something. Leaving my own house felt like backing away from a sleeping snake. I set a glass in the sink the way I always do, angled the dish towel exactly where Linda leaves it, and locked the door with the same 2 twists I've done since the Clinton years. Nothing dramatic, no movie music, just a man stepping off the edge of what he believes. Out on the sidewalk, porch lights blinked in unison as timers flipped over. Dogs barked at nothing, or maybe at me. I kept my eyes straight and counted my steps like a man praying without words. At the truck, I rested both hands on the hood to steady myself. In 38 years, I'd fixed leaks, budgets, and little broken hearts. I'd never spied on my wife. The thought sat heavy in my chest like a cinder block. But I remembered Linda's laugh with Tyler's voice braided through it, and the weight turned into something else, resolve. I started the engine and drove, a ghost in my own life. The next afternoon, I found a spot in the Home Depot lot under the one mesquite that throws decent shade. I killed the engine and stared at the small device in my palm like it might bite. Funny how a little plastic box can feel heavier than a toolbox. I put in the earbuds, the cheap kind you buy at the checkout because you forgot your good ones again. For a moment, I just listened to nothing, the kind of nothing that makes your ears ring. Then footsteps, a door creak, voices. My thumb hovered over pause, but I left it alone. When you've managed crews and crises for decades, you learn that truth rarely walks in on schedule. It slips in when you're tired and tempted to quit. The first words were ordinary, the way storms begin with regular air. "Hey," a woman's voice said softly. Not a stranger. My wife. I leaned back against the seat and braced for weather. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come," Linda said, a brightness in her tone I hadn't heard since Rachel was born. Then Tyler. "Traffic was murder, baby." The word wasn't new. I've heard men say it my whole life, at gas stations, ball games, checkout lines, but coming from him, in my house, to my wife, it cut the way paper does, thin, deep, sneaky. I felt something primitive rise up, the kind of heat that makes men do stupid things in parking lots. I gripped the steering wheel instead and made myself listen like a man fixing a leak, tracing the water to its source. They talked about yard work and dinner plans and me being busy as usual. The mundanity made it worse. Betrayal doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It drips into familiar rooms until the floor warps under your feet. A delivery truck honked somewhere behind me. In my ears, my marriage tilted another degree, and the picture frames on our walls started to slide. I fast-forwarded through the small talk until Tyler's voice changed. Lighter, careful. "Did you call the insurance company?" he asked. My chest tightened. Linda answered, matter of fact. $500,000. I'm the only beneficiary. $500,000. I've said numbers my whole life. Measurements, order totals, hours on a schedule. But I have never heard a number say what that number said. My name was a calculation. My life had a price tag. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until I heard my own heartbeat in the earbuds. I pressed pause and stared out at the orange vests, pushing carts back to the corral, ordinary men doing ordinary work at the end of an ordinary day. I pressed play again because denial doesn't keep you alive. Courage does. Tyler asked if I suspected anything. Linda laughed, a small, sharp sound I couldn't place anymore. The mesquite's shadow shifted across my windshield. Somewhere, a storm gathered its first drop. Then came the part that moved me from hurt to fear. They mentioned my blood pressure medication, joked that stress would do the rest, that these things look natural at my age. I'm not a fragile man, but I'm not 25 either. I know the way good men go, quietly, in recliners, after dinner. Hearing those two map out the end of me like a project plan. It took the oxygen out of the cab. I set the recorder on the seat as if it were hot, and let my hands hang open until feeling returned. In hardware, we talk about load limits, how much weight a shelf can hold before it bows. That sentence about my pills was my bowline. The shelf of my life bent. And then it hit me with the kind of clarity you only get when the ceiling cracks. They weren't just breaking vows. They were plotting a funeral. Mine. The steering wheel felt small in my hands. The world felt very, very specific. I shut it off and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. Crow's feet, sun-worn skin, a man who's carried more boxes than grudges. I thought about the poinsettias Linda and I sold for Rachel's choir, the time Tyler and I changed a tire on the freeway shoulder, the birthdays that blur together after 40. Grief is a thief. It steals the good first. I wouldn't let it. I listed out loud what was still mine: my name, my house, my daughter, my work ethic, my faith that right is still right. Then I listened again, not to be a martyr, but to be a witness. More giggles, more plans, a vacation fantasy they'd picked out like a couch. 38 years summed up as boring old Frank. I let the words pass through me and out the open window. A cart boy waved. I waved back, because good habits keep men from collapsing. The sun slid lower, and I knew what I'd be doing before it set. I drove home on muscle memory, the way you can drive a route and not recall a single stoplight. I went straight to the medicine cabinet and stared at the bottles that had watched me shave for decades. Sometimes the safest thing a man can do is remove variables. I did. Then I lay in bed beside the woman I'd married and counted breaths, hers, then mine, like an old metronome that refuses to change tempo. Ceiling fan turning, clock ticking. Somewhere a sprinkler hissed to life. She shifted and touched my arm in her sleep, a reflex born of years. I didn't move. There's a version of me that would have packed a bag, another that would have shouted names into the night. The version that survived chose stillness. In that stillness, I made a decision that felt like steel forming. I would not die quietly. I would not live loudly either. I would live precisely. Tomorrow would not be about rage. Tomorrow would be about truth. Tyler used charm as a tool, smiles, favors, stories that fit just right in the space between need and greed. Men like that build houses out of people's blind spots. I've spent 40 years fixing what breaks: hinges, budgets, tempers. So I decided to fix this the only way I know: slow, steady, documented. Not by playing his game, but by changing the rules. I gathered what mattered: timelines, names, places, the small details that make lies unravel. I would protect Rachel. I would protect the women he'd targeted, neighbors with kind eyes and checkbooks they trust too much. Most of all, I would protect the part of me that believes in right and wrong. Tomorrow I'd start making calls, asking careful questions, and putting pieces where they belonged. Not to get even, but to get honest. He used deceit to destroy people. I would use truth to destroy the deceit. And when truth finally stood up, it wouldn't need to raise its voice. The next morning I called in sick, which for me is like calling a snow day in July. I don't miss work, but I needed daylight and time. I parked a block from Tyler's place and waited with a thermos that tasted like stubbornness. When he finally came out, he wasn't dressed for job sites, no dirt on the boots, no tools in the bed, just a shiny pickup and a man who looks like opportunity from a distance. He headed north, not toward a nursery or supplier, but into neighborhoods where the mailboxes match the stonework and the HOA notices are written like wedding invitations. I kept 2 cars back, the way old dads keep their tempers, close enough to matter, far enough to blend. He didn't stop at a client's yard. He pulled into a driveway I knew well. Evelyn Hart's, our neighbor, widowed 3 years. The gate opened before he even pressed a button, and she stepped out the front door smiling like spring came early. Evelyn hugged him in a way that told me they weren't discussing sprinkler heads. Not a peck, not a polite shoulder tap, but the kind of embrace that says, "I've been waiting for you." I watched from a slow roll past the house, pretending to admire the desert landscaping I've complimented a dozen times at block parties. Tyler carried nothing in and came out with a small bag and that grin men wear when they think they've won something. He checked his phone, typed fast with both thumbs, then headed back toward Loop 101. I thought about the times I'd shoveled her driveway after a dust storm, the times Linda had taken her a casserole. It's a strange feeling, seeing kindness you gave become a door someone else walks through with bad intentions. I followed again. It felt like tracking a coyote. You don't run, you observe. Coyotes tell on themselves if you give them enough road. Tyler did. His second stop was Marjorie Park's villa, the one with the blue tile fountain that never seems to shut off. I know Marjorie from HOA meetings. Sharp mind, soft heart, a laugh that can fill a room and make you feel included even if you weren't. Tyler didn't bother with the pretense this time. He walked straight in like he'd memorized the alarm code. 40 minutes later, he left with his shirt untucked and a gift bag the size of a shoebox. Third stop, Greyhawk, where the guard waves you through if you look like money. Patricia Whitman answered her door in tennis whites, smiling like life finally remembered her name. Tyler stayed nearly an hour. By noon, I'd watched him visit 3 women who have more in common than zip codes. He was running a route, not a business. No invoices, no tools, just promises. Men my age can see patterns the way barbers see bad haircuts. This one screamed. When a man leaves 4 houses in a row looking freshly complimented, you don't need a spreadsheet to understand the hustle. Still, I mentally kept one. Time in, time out, what he carried, what he didn't. He never came out with dirt under his nails, only gifts, bottles, boxes, envelopes with a polite thickness. He texted on the curb before pulling away, firing off follow-up lines like a salesman hitting quarterly goals. But Tyler wasn't selling irrigation. He was selling attention to women who deserved the real thing. I thought about the way he'd call me sir in front of Rachel, the way he'd lift the heavy end of a sofa for show. Charm is a tool. In the wrong hands, it's a pry bar. The climax came when he checked his reflection in the truck window, smoothed his hair, and smiled at himself. That's when I knew. Landscapers wipe sweat. Con artists fix their hair before the next promise. I waited until evening to knock on Evelyn's door. You don't blindside a neighbor in daylight. You offer dignity with the difficult. She opened in a cardigan and the kind of pearls you wear when you want to feel strong. I asked for 5 minutes and she let me in because that's who she is. I didn't accuse. I asked questions a father might ask gently, like easing a splinter out of a child's finger. Has Tyler asked for help with his business? Has he borrowed just until a check clears? Her eyes filled before her voice did. He's under pressure, she said. Equipment, insurance. I wanted to help. I nodded. Did he mention love? A future? Her hand covered her mouth the way women cover a laugh at a joke they don't find funny. He said I make him feel safe. We sat in quiet long enough to hear the fountain outside. Then she whispered the number. Thousands. Not once. Not twice. It's one thing to suspect your wife isn't special to the man who's taking her from you. It's another to hear the word fiancé used in 3 different kitchens by 3 different women who think they're the exception. I met with Marjorie next, cookies on a plate, a tissue already in her hand like her heart had called ahead. She showed me messages that could have been written to any of them. Favorite songs, our place, the same photograph of a sunset with 3 different captions. Patricia had a folder, because some people keep their pain tidy. Bank transfers, Venmo notes disguised as errands, a ring catalog page with a circle around something tasteful and too expensive. The climax hit like a familiar door slamming. Linda's name, in a thread, rewritten as a mistake we're correcting. That was the moment I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started feeling protective of everyone he'd marked. Linda made her choices. These women were preyed upon. The old manager in me clocked in. I built a timeline the way I build end caps, visible, sturdy, impossible to ignore. Dates of visits, text patterns, when Linda's girls' dinners synced with Tyler's late bids. I asked each woman for permission to document, and they gave it because trust grows fast when a shared wound is exposed. I photographed gift bags, copied bank statements with identifying info redacted, respect matters, even in a mess. I printed screenshots and slid them into a binder, the way you protect paperwork you can't afford to lose. I mapped routes on a paper map because batteries die and paper doesn't. The work steadied me. When your hands know how to fix things, they don't like being idle while your heart's on fire. By sunset, the notebook had weight. It thumped when I set it down, a sound that said, "This isn't a suspicion anymore. This is a structure that can hold truth without wobbling." By the third day, the binder had become a case. Cash apps, jewelry receipts, duplicate engagement texts stamped with different timestamps, and worst of all, the insurance talk between Linda and Tyler that had shifted my world off its foundation. I met a detective I trust, Alvarez, just to learn the shape of the law without tipping it into motion. He listened, careful, professional, and told me something I already knew. Timing matters. If we moved too soon, Tyler would wriggle. If we moved too late, someone else might lose more than money. And Linda, she might see the train coming and step away from the tracks. I drove home slow, thinking about how older men learn patience the hard way. We break something by forcing it, then spend double fixing it. The climax of that day wasn't a revelation. It was restraint. I had enough proof to scream. I needed enough proof to end the show, not just interrupt it. I sat at our kitchen table with the binder open and a cold cup of coffee sweating onto a ring that'll probably outlast me. I pictured courtrooms I've only seen on TV and the way good lawyers can turn daylight into fog. I imagined Linda crying on a stand and Tyler looking humble in a borrowed suit. Denial is their best friend. Confusion is their home field. I didn't want a debate. I wanted a reveal. The kind you can't talk your way out of because everyone has already seen it with their own eyes. I thought about the block, the neighbors who wave even on bad days, the little kids on scooters who think adults have it handled. If the truth broke open in public, it wouldn't belong to Tyler anymore. It would belong to the community he underestimated. The climax was a simple sentence I wrote at the top of a yellow pad. Make it undeniable. Underlined twice, because some decisions earn the ink. So I designed a plan that didn't need fists or fireworks. It needed daylight, witnesses, and the kind of timing that's hard to argue with. I wasn't going to teach anyone a dangerous lesson or play amateur anything. I was going to let gravity do its work. I coordinated with people who had the training to handle emergencies, because when men my age say be smart, we mean let professionals do what they're paid to do. I informed the right folks at the right time, and I set the stage in my own home, the one place they felt untouchable. If Tyler loved an audience, I would give him one he couldn't charm. If Linda believed lies needed shadows, I would open every curtain. The humiliation wouldn't be mine anymore. It would be theirs, and it would be safe, legal, and witnessed. As I closed the binder that night, the house finally sounded like itself again. Not quiet, ready. Patterns tell on people. Every Tuesday, Linda had girls' dinner, and every Tuesday, like clockwork, Tyler's white pickup idled near our driveway long enough for the neighbors' sprinklers to cycle. When you've scheduled crews and counted inventory for 40 years, you learn to trust the calendar more than promises. I started marking Tuesdays on a yellow pad. The time her perfume came out, the time his text preview lit her phone, the time porch lights snapped on across the block. Routine is where decent men live. Routine is where liars hide. I timed my own habits to theirs, left the TV on a little louder, let the dog out a little later, so nothing felt different. Men my age know that if you change too much too fast, you spook the truth. I didn't need theatrics. I needed Tuesday to do what Tuesday always did. Hand me both of them in the same place, under the same roof, believing the world was asleep. That week, I told Linda I'd be doing late inventory, counting pallets in the back, the kind of dull store talk that makes eyes glaze. She didn't ask which department or which manager had scheduled it. She just said, "Oh, good," and that good hit me like a tape measure snapping back. Relief is honest even when words aren't. I've heard that sound 1,000 times. When a customer realizes a part fits, when a coworker hears their shift got covered. This relief wasn't about my workload. It was about an empty house. I kissed her cheek, habit more than romance, and felt her tilt away a degree, subtle as a crooked picture frame. Older folks will understand. the way a long marriage collects tiny angles until the whole room leans. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee and watched the desert sky turn that pale silver it gets before heat. Tuesday was coming, and I was finally ready to meet it. Preparation calms a man's hands. I walked the house like a foreman finishing a walkthrough, checked door sensors, made sure my phone alerts were working, set the cameras to notify, not blare. I wasn't playing hero, I was being careful. I texted 2 neighbors whose trust I've earned with jump starts and borrowed tools. Heads up, doing some maintenance checks Tuesday. If you see activity, it's probably me. You don't make a scene, you lay groundwork. I put the important papers in one place in case the night got messy. IDs, insurance, Rachel's spare key. I took a slow lap through each room, not to spy but to remember. The wedding photo that always leans left, the dent in the hallway baseboard from a tricycle 25 years ago, the window that sticks when it rains. If you're my age, you know the drill. Tighten what's loose, label what's unclear, measure twice, cut once. By sundown, the house felt like a stage set. Nothing added, nothing missing, everything intentional. Tuesday afternoon slid in on quiet tires. I parked 2 blocks away where the Palo Verde throws skinny shade and watched the street like I've watched aisles for shoplifters. Steady, patient, unblinking. Tyler's truck appeared right on schedule, nose shiny, bed empty, like a salesman on the first day of the month. He rolled to a stop at my curb with the comfort of a man who's done it too many times to feel wrong anymore. Inside my chest, I waited for the old heat. Rage, humiliation, the urge to storm in and swing history into place. It never came. Instead, I felt the same cool I get when a problem finally clicks. This wasn't about catching them in a TV moment. It was about ending the confusion for everyone who deserved clarity. I checked the time, took one slow breath, and reminded myself, justice is a process, not a punchline. Then I watched him walk up my path like he lived there. Walls remember. From my spot outside, I could hear the low thrum of a playlist Linda saves for holidays, the clink of glass, that too bright laugh I hadn't earned in a long time. If you've ever stood outside your own life, listening, you know how sound can make a heart sit up straight. I pictured my kitchen, the good towels out, a candle working overtime, Tyler leaning where I lean. For a second, I saw our early years, bagels on a milk crate table, Rachel in a high chair slapping applesauce like cymbals. Then the present snapped back into focus. Not everything that breaks needs a hammer. Some things need daylight. I checked my notifications, watched the indicators light like runway markers, and let their comfort curdle into shame all on its own. There's a sound every liar fears more than a slammed door. It's the sound that says, "Pay attention, everyone." I made sure the right ears would hear it, and then I waited. I've always taught Rachel, in an emergency, say only what's true. I called 911 and reported a possible issue at my address. No theatrics, no guesses, just facts enough for dispatch to send help. Then I drove the 2 blocks like a neighbor coming home to trouble, not a man delivering it. By the time I turned onto our street, porches had birthed people in slippers and ball caps, the way communities do when a siren whispers down the block. I parked crooked and stepped out with the same face I wear when a pallet tips. Concern first, leadership second. I don't know what's going on, I told the nearest pair of eyes, and that was true. I didn't know how the night would end, only that it would not end in shadows. When you're older, you learn to let professionals take the first door. Pride is loud. Wisdom waves them past. I stood where a husband should stand, close enough to answer, far enough to let them work. Rachel's unit, Rescue 3, came in hot, but controlled. That practiced ballet of lights and calm voices that makes civilians breathe again. I saw my daughter step out in boots I once bought her on sale and a uniform she earned all by herself. There's an ache only parents know, watching your kid walk toward a thing that could crush them, and trusting their training anyway. She didn't see me at first. She saw the address number, and her training took the wheel. Clipboard, quick questions, eyes up the stairs. I wanted to stop time, to grab her hand and say, "Baby, not this house, not this truth." But some truths don't ask permission. They knock the lock out and walk in. She led her team with that steady voice I used to hear from the car seat singing along to the radio. "We've got it," she said to the captain. She had no idea what it was. That's the moment that broke me and made me proud. Firefighters moved with the quiet speed of people who know exactly where their feet are. Doors opened. Names were called. Upstairs, voices tangled. Urgent, messy, human. You can tell panic from pain by the way it grabs syllables. This had both. I stood on the lawn with neighbors I've loaned extension cords to and felt our block hold its breath. The old man from 2 houses down leaned on his cane and said, "Frank, you all right?" I answered with the smallest nod because anything larger might have cracked me. Minutes stretch in emergencies, seconds get elastic. Then a brief, impossible silence took the whole house in its hands. No playlist, no clink of glass, just the shuffle of boots and the scratch of radios. In that quiet, the picture of my life rearranged itself into something I recognized. Not a happy scene, but an honest one. When voices returned, they were all business. That's when I knew the turning had turned. They came down in order. Rachel first, face the color of paper behind a mask of training. Then 2 firefighters steering a stretcher with the careful dignity reserved for people who made bad choices and still deserve privacy. Another team followed with a second stretcher. Sheets covered more than they revealed, but I'm not naive, and neither is a neighborhood. Phones rose out of pockets the way they do now, like lighters at old concerts. I caught Rachel's eye for a split second. Her jaw moved, something like "Dad," and then it set. She didn't cry where anyone could see. She did her job. Pride and grief don't sit well together, but that night they shared a chair in my chest. The captain gave me the nod I've given 100 times in smaller ways. "We'll handle it." The stretchers rolled past the azaleas Linda swore she'd keep alive this time. I stepped aside, as any decent man would, and let consequences through the door. The block watched what secrets look like when they lose their shadows. No speeches, no shouting, just the slow march of truth from a private room to a public curb. You could feel the temperature change. Neighbors shifting from concern to comprehension to that stunned silence people keep when they're cataloging details for the retelling. I didn't tell anyone to put their phones away. You can't ask for witnesses and then edit what they saw. I stood on my lawn, a place where I've fixed bikes, sprayed weeds, waved at school buses, and I let the facts breathe. Men my age understand that some endings are mercy, even if they arrive dressed like humiliation. The sirens softened as the ambulances pulled away, and the street exhaled. I looked at the front door that had welcomed birthdays and Christmases and first days of school. Tonight it had done something braver. It had told the truth. And there's no going back from that. Not for them, not for me. Honor Health. Osborne has that late evening hum older folks know. TVs murmuring game highlights, vending machines coughing up sodas, sneakers squeaking down waxed halls. Word travels faster than gurneys. Couple caught in a compromising scene, a nurse whispered to another. Not cruel, just human. I sat in the waiting area with a styrofoam cup cooling in my hand, staring at a sign about fall risks as if it applied to marriages. People tried not to stare, then stared anyway. You can tell when strangers recognize you from the block. Sympathy first, curiosity next. I kept my voice low when reception asked my name, and I gave it like a man turning in a badge. Frank Miller, husband, father. The chair felt smaller than I remembered from other nights. Sprained wrists, stitches, a bout of bronchitis. Families past holding blankets and hope. I held neither. I just held still. Some problems you can tighten with a wrench. This one I could only wait through, and that's its own kind of pain. Rachel found me by the hospital map. Eyes red but steady, uniform creased in all the right places. It's strange watching your kid go professional with your heartbreak. She slipped into the seat beside me and put a hand on my forearm the way she used to when she was little and a thunderstorm grumbled. "Dad, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." "Neither did I, sweetheart." The words landed soft but final. We sat with them like you sit with a family recipe, handed down, unsweetened, real. She told me what she could as a paramedic, not as a daughter. Vitals stable, staff doing their jobs, protocols followed. I nodded, grateful for structure in a night that refused to hold a shape. A volunteer offered us water. Rachel took 2 because she always thinks ahead. I watched her breathe in and out, counting to 4 like I taught her before piano recitals. That steadiness was the only clean line in a smeared picture. Later, a nurse led me to a room with the blinds half drawn and the smell of sanitizer doing battle with perfume. Linda lay there with the sheet up to her collarbone, eyes swollen, voice small. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed. I've heard that line at the returns counter 1,000 times. Wrong size, wrong color, wrong life. She reached for my hand, and for a heartbeat my muscle memory cooperated. Then the rest of me remembered the recordings, the math, the Tuesday calendars. I let my hand rest on the rail instead. Silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's respect for what words can't fix. She asked if we could talk later. I said we could. Time is generous that way, always offering later, even when later shouldn't be accepted. A monitor beeped her truth back at us in green lines. I looked at the woman I'd grown old beside and realized we hadn't grown the same direction in years. That grief was heavier than anger. I'd barely reached the waiting room when a familiar scent of lavender and desert rain cut through the hospital air. Evelyn Hart stood there, cardigan neat, hands shaking, determination holding her up like scaffolding. "Frank, I need to speak with you and Rachel about Tyler Cruz." She said his name like a bad taste. I waved Rachel over, and the 3 of us moved to a quiet corner near the volunteer desk where a puzzle lay half-finished, pieces of someone else's picture waiting to be found. Evelyn spoke in clipped sentences, the way you do when holding yourself together is a full-time job. Money lent, not repaid. Promises made in kitchens and on porches. Jewelry borrowed for appraisal. My daughter's face went through the stages adults recognize: disbelief, dawning, decision. Evelyn kept apologizing like she'd broken something of ours. I told her she'd broken a spell, and sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do. She nodded, eyes wet. Then I'm not done talking. Evelyn's story opened a door, and behind it was a hallway of others. She'd done what good neighbors do, called around. "I think you should hear from a few more women," she said, voice steadying as purpose found it. She laid out details like receipts on a kitchen table, transfers labeled truck payment, gift cards purchased for emergencies, a bracelet gone missing right after an "I love you" text. If you're over 50, you've seen this movie. New attention offered to lonely hearts, then the bill. Only this time it was playing in our neighborhood, with our names in the credits. Evelyn wasn't here to gossip. She was here to testify. She held out her phone, scrolling through messages that all sounded like Tyler even when the words changed. "You're different. We're forever. Just a short-term crunch, sweetheart." Rachel rubbed her temple like a medic triaging a pileup. This wasn't one wreck. It was a pattern. And patterns tell the truth better than speeches do. We didn't have to wait long. Marjorie arrived in flats and a firm hug that told me she still believed in kindness, even now. Patricia followed, clutching a manila folder like a life jacket. Lorraine came last, a church friend of Evelyn's, eyes hard from practiced grace. We found a side room near the chapel, and those 3 sat shoulder to shoulder as if bracing against a wind. Their stories matched in rhythm, if not in rhyme, the same nicknames, the same accidents, the same future he sketched with a dull pencil and brighter lies. Patricia opened her folder and showed bank screens, ring pictures with circles drawn in pen, a text calling her the only one on the same night another phone pinged Evelyn. Every detail was a puzzle piece, and together they clicked. Rachel stopped being my daughter for a moment and became what the city pays her to be, calm in chaos, clear-eyed, ready to move. "This isn't just heartbreak," she said. "This is a case." There's a moment older adults recognize, the shift from telling to doing. Rachel pulled out her phone and made the kind of call you make when the room needs a grown-up with a badge. "We need to report fraud, multiple victims, and additional concerns," she told dispatch, measured and precise. She looked at each woman and said, "You will be believed." It was the exact sentence I didn't realize I needed. Evelyn exhaled like a valve releasing. Marjorie squeezed my hand, quick, grateful, as if I'd fixed a stuck drawer. Lorraine nodded once, a warrior's salute. I thought about all the potlucks, HOA meetings, and mailbox chats where Tyler had walked past with that easy grin. He counted on our politeness. He didn't plan for our patience turning into resolve. We agreed to stay put until an officer arrived. Rachel fetched waters, as if hydration could patch holes in hearts. In a way it does. Small mercies matter on nights that ask a lot. Detective Alvarez showed up the way good men do. No swagger, just a notepad, a pen that works, and eyes that say he's seen worse and still cares. He listened without rushing, asking questions that made sense, never once doubting the answers because they came from women who'd lived long enough to know when they'd been used. He checked names, dates, bank screens, promised to pull camera footage where he could. He didn't flinch when I mentioned the recordings. "We'll handle chain of custody," he said. The phrase sounded like a hand on your back steering you around a spill. He asked Rachel for her incident report once she was off duty, and she agreed, professionalism layered over pain like armor. Papers were copied, statements were signed, no TV drama, just real work under bad lights. When he stood, Alvarez said the thing every victim needs. "You've done the right thing. We'll take it from here." Not all heroes wear capes. Some carry staplers. By evening, the hospital's rhythm slowed to that late-hour shuffle, and the day's broken pieces started settling where they'd belong. Alvarez returned with updates that sounded like nails finding studs, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, exploitation of vulnerable adults, and yes, based on evidence, attempted insurance homicide. I felt my spine straighten like someone had tightened bolts I couldn't reach. Tyler was processed down the hall with officers at both elbows, his charm useless under fluorescent truth. Linda, too, faced consequences. Watching her sign paperwork with shaking hands felt like watching a house you built get red-tagged. Sad, inevitable, necessary. Nobody cheered. Grown-ups don't celebrate arrests. They accept them. Evelyn whispered a prayer. Marjorie dabbed her eyes. Patricia closed her folder and held it to her chest, lighter now that it wasn't just hers to carry. The charges weren't revenge. They were a mirror, polished and held steady. Every name reflected looked exactly like itself again. When the stretchers became paperwork and the sirens faded into hospital air, Rachel and I stepped into the courtyard where a fountain tried its best to make peace with the night. She stood shoulder to shoulder with me, small again for a heartbeat, then all grown up and unbreakable. "You didn't have to do anything illegal," she whispered, "the way you talk to someone who almost drowned and is finally breathing. You just let the truth speak." Exactly. The word left my mouth like a release valve easing off pressure. I thought about all the choices men my age face when the bottom falls out. Rage, running, surrender. I'd chosen to witness, to document, to call in the people built for the hard parts. Rachel slid her hand into the crook of my elbow, an old habit from crossing streets. We walked back inside, not lighter, but clearer. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't the loud thing. Sometimes it's standing still long enough for the truth to be heard. The case didn't spread, it detonated. By breakfast, my phone lit up like a slot machine. "Scottsdale landscaper charged in multi-victim romance scam," the local station said, and then Phoenix picked it up, and then a syndicated feed with my porch in the B-roll. Old co-workers texted, "Is this you, Frank?" The store manager called to say I could take as much time as I needed. I heard my name on talk radio between ads for tires and term life, the host using a voice people save for weather warnings. Strangers messaged to say they'd seen something similar with an uncle or a neighbor across town. It's funny the way truth travels, slow for months, then everywhere at once like summer heat. Reporters knocked, polite but hungry. I kept the screen door closed and the coffee on. I wasn't a hero. I was a witness who didn't look away. The climax of that first day was simple. The lies had finally lost their echo. The neighborhood did what neighborhoods used to do. People stopped by with casseroles and faded Pyrex, paper plates wrapped in foil, a pound cake from the church lady down the block that tasted like childhood and mercy. Nobody lingered for gossip. They lingered for quiet respect, the kind that leaves a dish, a hug, and space. Evelyn came with a notebook and an idea. "We can do this together," she said. And by Sunday, she'd started a support circle at the community room near the pool. Women brought bank statements and broken sentences. The first meeting lasted 2 hours and ended with phone numbers exchanged and a pot of coffee emptied to the last drop. I watched them stack chairs and straighten tables, shoulders squaring as purpose returned. We're not designed to heal alone. A retired teacher offered to help with paperwork. A widower promised rides at night. That was the climax. Not headlines, not outrage, ordinary people threading each other back together. Court moved like molasses until it didn't. Tyler stood in orange behind glass, the man who once flashed smiles now blinking under fluorescence. The judge denied bail without drama. Investigators laid maps on a board and drew lines from Scottsdale to Henderson, then on to El Paso. Same stories, same scripts, different kitchens. 25 years, they said, was the likely floor, not the ceiling. I sat behind the victims, not next to them, because this was their seat to claim, and I was there to back the row. Outside, a reporter shouted questions about motive, about my marriage, about whether I'd expected any of this. I answered with the old man's shrug that means nothing and everything. You never expect a storm, you just keep a tarp handy. The climax wasn't the gavel. It was the first time I saw Tyler look for a friendly face and find none. Without the con, he was smaller than his boots. Linda was released on bond to her sister's place across town. The paperwork was thick, the instructions thin, court dates, restrictions, signatures stacked like shingles after hail. I drove home along the frontage road and thought about how endings really happen, slow, then all at once. I met with an attorney who wore kind eyes and plain ties, and we did the math of untangling a life: house, pension, insurance, the keepsakes that matter more than their price. I filed for divorce and kept what I'd built, not as a victory lap, but as a boundary. I boxed Linda's things carefully: wedding china wrapped in yesterday's news, a sweater she loved, a music box that never stayed wound. People think anger fuels these moments. It doesn't. Lists do. You make one, you follow it, you stop when the pen runs out. The climax arrived when the locksmith handed me 2 new keys and dropped the old ones into a zip-top bag labeled Past. Rachel moved back into her old room for a bit, which turned into a few weeks of shared coffee, 2 mugs on the porch rail, and a rhythm we hadn't had since marching band mornings. Evenings became our therapy, sometimes talking, sometimes letting the crickets do it for us. We sorted mail and memories. She teased me about my ancient grill. I teased her about alphabetizing spices. On Tuesdays, we still noticed the hour, and then we let it pass. I fixed a wobble in the porch step that had waited years for attention. She planted marigolds, sturdy little things that glow even when the day refuses. We didn't say healing out loud, but it happened anyway, in the way her laughter came back unforced, in the way I slept through midnight, in the way the house stopped flinching at unexpected sounds. The climax of those weeks was small and perfect. One quiet night, we ran out of things to say and didn't need to fill the silence. There's a look people give each other after the same storm, recognition without resume. One afternoon, Rachel came in from a double shift, dropped her bag, and sat cross-legged on the rug like she was 12. "Dad," she said, and the word carried more weight than usual. "I see you." I answered, "I see you too," and we both smiled at how simple and impossible that sentence felt in other seasons. She told me about a call where a stranger held her hand and breathed with her through the worst 5 minutes of his life. "It's not the training," she said. "It's the staying." We had been staying for each other, staying on the porch, staying with the truth, staying through the awkward part where you don't know what to do with your hands. The climax wasn't an embrace, it was an understanding. We weren't just related, we were teammates. If you're over 50, you know, survival is lighter when someone carries the other handle. Months later, the sentencing read like the end of a long, bad chapter. 28 years. The courtroom exhaled. Evelyn squeezed my arm. Not triumph, just release. The judge's words stacked like bricks. Restitution, no contact, supervision. The women recovered most of their money through seizures and settlements. Never all, because time and trust don't come with receipts, but enough to feel seen by the system that too often arrives late. I clocked a few shifts back at Home Depot, part-time, easing into aisles that still smelled like cedar and clean plans. Carlos from Hardware hugged me in that quick male way. 2 pats, step back, eyes glossier than he wanted. "Good to have you, old man," he said. I trimmed paint sticks for a kid helping his mom choose a blue that looked like sky after rain. The climax was that ordinary. Handing over a little bundle of usefulness and realizing life, stubborn as dandelions, grows back through cracked concrete. A strange title found me at the gas station between the squeegee and the receipt printer. "You're the man who exposed the con artist," the attendant said, half whisper, half headline. It followed me to the barber and the grocery line, a sticker I hadn't asked for. Reporters sent emails with subject lines that sparkled. Producers called with exclusive offers that sounded like bright rooms and brighter lights. I thanked them and deleted the rest. Some stories can't survive the studio gloss. They need porch wood and chipped mugs to make sense. I did say yes to a community workshop Evelyn organized. No cameras, just chairs in a circle and pens that worked. We talked warning signs and gut feelings and the old-fashioned art of checking references. I told them my favorite sentence from the whole mess: make it undeniable. The climax that night was applause that felt more like a promise. We'll watch out for each other better than we did before. Spring found its way back to our block. Rachel pinned on a new badge, district supervisor, and grinned like a kid who just beat her mile time. We celebrated with takeout on the tailgate, the desert breeze turning napkins into kites. "Dad," she said between bites, "after what we went through, I can handle any emergency." I looked at the woman who once needed my hand to cross a street and nodded. So can I. Not because I grew muscles, but because I grew patience in places I'd never planted it. I fixed the screen door that used to snag, replaced a humming porch light, and finally tossed a stack of past-due catalogs that promised happiness in 12 weekly payments. The climax of this chapter wasn't fireworks. It was noticing the ordinary miracle. The house holds steady, the coffee tastes right, the phone rings for normal reasons again. We stood in the doorway at dusk and let the quiet fit us like a well-worn jacket. Justice didn't show up in a cape. It arrived in paperwork, steady voices, and a neighborhood that refused to look away. I thought that hidden tube meant my life was over. Turns out it was a beginning I didn't ask for, one that taught me patience is a kind of courage, and refusing to be a victim is a decision you make every single day. Most evenings now, Rachel and I sit on the porch and let the Arizona sky set itself on fire. We don't rehearse the pain anymore. We remember the lesson. Wisdom isn't loud. It waits, it watches, and when the time is right, it tells the truth so clearly even liars hear it. If this hit close to home, type "Justice Matters" and tell me the one warning sign you wish you'd trusted sooner. Pick your path. 1. Stay patient and document. Or 2. Confront fast and loud. What would you choose today? The porch light's on, the story's quieter, but we're still paying attention.